And that testifies to the approach. I've got an idea, Michele's got different. I imagine that Vitaliano has got another idea of the film as well. And I think that's a positive thing. We don't have a monolithic view of what this film is all about, and I think that's positive. It means that the film has a life of its own, and there's various different ways you can read it. It's not so important to understand what is the right interpretation of this film, but to start asking oneself questions about why, to start putting questions to oneself. I wouldn't worry too much about the answers. Well, yes. Can I add something?
Just a little thing. I think that you want me to speak in Italian?
Whichever you can.
Okay, I think that the work of art doesn't have to give answer, but to raise questions. That's all.
Anyone else like to add anything to that? No? We have a question down in the front here somewhere. Yeah, there.
Benjamin Klon. Erstmal möchte ich den Schauspielern
First of all, I'd like to congratulate the actors for their excellent performance. The cinematography is wonderful. There's wonderful style, and I like the soundtrack as well. But I'm actually focusing on something else in my question, a question to the director and the actors. Were you sometimes afraid, especially Michaela, you were involved in the whole process physically? I mean, perhaps I've got prejudice about this because I've just seen the film and I still see you in the character, but weren't you afraid that what happened in the film would also spill over into reality? Because you went through the whole process. Did you get very involved in it in that way or not?
Well,
as far as I'm concerned, it's got nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me as myself. I'm outside of that. I mean, I was inside the character in a sense. The magic of working with Matteo is quite striking. He draws you into the whole process. We were working with a large crew in a sense, but and as we went along, the screenplay changed, the characters changed, and in that period I became very involved in the film. For example, there were times when I got very tired. It was hard for me to climb up the stairs, for example. So there was a moment when it was half and half. I wasn't quite sure if I managed to keep myself out of falling too much into this role, but no, I didn't get right into the role. It has nothing to do with me. Matteo. You complimented us on the cinematography and what the DOP did. The director of photography is here as well. He's at the back. The set design, Paolo Bonfini, and the editor, Marco Spolettini, are here as well in Berlin. So the images, I mean, they're really the ones who created them. I was talking in the first person, but of course the images are always created in a group working with these other people. We're a group of friends who work together. We've been working for years. This is my 5th film. We've been working together right from the outset. So I think it's quite right that we share the praise. Sometimes people forget that there are so many of us who are involved in the process. And Maricetta is here as well. She was responsible for the sound design.
We have a question. David Siems, German Press. I read today that the story is based on a true story, and this morning I read that the story of the film is based on a true story, on a true background. Can you tell us something about this background, about this couple and what happened in Italy?
Maybe Massimo could tell us. Massimo, would you like to tell us the story?
Sì, la storia è ispirata a un fatto di cronaca.
Well, yes, it's inspired by something which really happened within the news around about 10 years ago, and it's not a very pleasant story.
c'era quest'uomo che aveva questo problema
There was a man
di amare una donna.
who had exactly this problem. He loved a woman, and we say love, but love in quotation marks, let's say. He could only love a woman if she was extremely thin. It was pathological.
Sì, insomma, aveva un problema molto grosso che lo ha
He had a very serious
portato
problem.
prima a entrare in un ospedale psichiatrico.
And
E poi ha
he was
avuto una
actually
relazione con una
put into a
donna che
psychiatric
ha
hospital, and then he had a relationship
ucciso.
with a woman.
In questo
And he unfortunately
frangente
killed her,
ha
and
scritto un diario,
he wrote a diary
da cui noi
while he was under
veramente
treatment.
siamo partiti soltanto per capire, per cercare
And we
di
looked at
capire
that diary
questa
primarily
personalità.
to try to
Poi da qui
understand
ci siamo
this
distaccati
character, but
anche
then we drew away
perché,
from that.
sì, insomma, il personaggio non era una bella persona.
Also because the character wasn't a very nice chap.
Lentamente ci siamo allontanati.
So slowly but surely we moved away from that. But it was very important for us to try to understand why this man had been acting in this way.
I psichiatri che l'avevano tenuto in cura non erano riusciti a dare una risposta.
We didn't manage to
Anzi,
get an
parlavano
answer. He
proprio
was
di questa
under
percezione come di un
therapy, and
buco
neither he
nella
nor the
psichiatria.
psychiatrist could really give us an answer. It's a bit like a big black hole in psychiatry explaining this sort of thing, and that was the starting point.
Successa nel nord Italia.
And this happened in the north of Italy,
Non tanto lontana da quella
in an area
che
not too far from where we shot on
ma poi,
location.
sì, ci siamo allontanati.
But we moved away slowly but surely from that.
Abbiamo seguito l'anima della vicenda
Well,
senza
we
cercare
looked
di ricostruire
at
esattamente la
the
realtà
spirit
come
of what had happened rather than the actual hard facts. We didn't want to
il protagonista, perché l'altra no.
really
Però ci siamo fermati
stick
un
too
attimo
much to the
prima,
facts, what
nel
the
senso
characters
che
told
nella
us,
storia
because of
reale
course the
lei
poor,
colpisce lui,
or what he says.
crede di averlo ammazzato,
In real life she was dead
chiama
now.
l'ambulanza,
She, in the film, hits him on the head. She calls the ambulance
lui
with a
non
sense of
muore,
guilt.
e un anno dopo
He doesn't
cercando
die, and a
di
year
vivere
later
con lei la uccide.
he kills her when trying to live with her once again. And we stopped
Prima,
before
infatti,
that
il film
point,
lasciamo aperto
which
così,
was the case in real life. I mean, we leave
morto,
the
sta per morire.
conclusion open at the end of the film. Perhaps he's about to die, perhaps he's about to just scrape by
Come sempre, per
and
me
survive.
la cronaca è uno spunto
So we took this news story as the starting point, but it's really just a springboard for us to then invent places and characters. I'm sure the characters are very different than they had been in real life. It's also in a different setting. This was the same with the last film that Matteo made as well. That also took a news story as its starting point. But it was really just a springboard. The basis for starting to narrate a story, starting to dig into the soul of certain people who do things that we might describe as extreme. And also there's a question of having respect for things that have actually happened, for the people involved. I never saw a photo of the woman who'd been involved in this actual news story or anything like that, partly out of respect.
Critiche?
Any criticism?
It does.
Ecco.
Ciao, Francesco Di Ravallò di Acchiappa Film Italia.
Proprio da te la critica, dall'Italia.
From Chiappa Film in Italy. Yes, that's where criticism always comes from Italy.
Dovrebbe spaventare molto, credo.
Come?
This is some,
Uno parla dei giornalisti.
you ought to be worried when none of the Italian journalists talk. I mean, that's when you should be worried. No, they've already talked, don't you worry. Yes, but I'm sure there's some other people lurking here who've got questions.
Vedere un film sia la base di una conversazione con un regista.
I mean, I think that seeing the film is the crux of having a discussion with the